You'll never go back to your old recipe once you have made this amazing, really real coconut pie. Of course, a really real coconut pie begins with a pie crust made with coconut oil. But don't attempt to make a pie crust with coconut oil if you don't follow these important pie crust instructions. And of course, a really real coconut pie filling needs to be made with coconut milk. Now, you can use the coconut milk beverage and, of course, shredded coconut. No need for imitation coconut flavoring when you have the real thing. And of course, your meringue needs to be topped with even more coconut. Welcome to Homemade Cooking in Texas. I'm Carolyn Gibson from Dogwood Gardens, where homemade cooking is surprisingly easy, healthier for you and your family, saves money, and tastes great. Come join me today as I share my favorite recipes, and I hope they will become your favorite recipes. And don't forget, like and subscribe to my channel. If you want melt in your mouth pie crust made with coconut oil, you're going to have to forget everything the cooking shows tell you and everything the cookbooks tell you, because this is made a little differently. Now, I've got 2 cups of all-purpose white flour that's been sifted and 2 pinches of salt. Now, I need a 2/3 cup of coconut oil plus 2 tablespoons. Now, you've got to make sure that your coconut oil is soft enough that you can dip it out. You see how soft that is. I'm going in for my second one. Now, you've got to make sure, now this coconut oil's been in my pantry while I don't have it heated. And it is really, really hard. Now, if you try to use your coconut oil in that state, it's just not going to work. Okay, we're going to mix this up. And this is a little bit different. I'm not going to use, for some reason, using the coconut oil does not work with one of these pastry cutters. I'm going to use my hands. And it seems like the warmth of your hands really helps this mix in better, where you don't have a tough dough. So I'm going to get all this going pretty good. Just kind of rubbing it between my fingers. Now I'm ready to add a little water. You tell us, it's a pretty messy job. So I'm going to start out with a tablespoon. I'm probably going to need 2 tablespoons, but I'm just going to kind of put this together. I need to make a ball with it. Get another tablespoon in there. Let's see if it makes a ball. Okay. I might need just one more tablespoon. The reason there's different, you need to use different amounts of water is because the humidity has a lot to do with the flour. Now, your professional cooks are going to weigh their flour instead of measuring it, because how much fluffiness is in there and the humidity and all that all makes a difference. So we're getting it in here and getting our ball. Making quite a mess, but when you're working with pie crust, that's just what you get, is a big mess. Now, I've got my ball formed. I'll stick here together. Now, at this point, the cookbooks and the cooking shows are going to tell you to take your little ball, wrap it up in saran wrap, and put it in the refrigerator and get it good and cold. Now, you cannot do this with coconut oil. You wrap this up, put it in the refrigerator to let it cool off. It's going to be hard as a rock, and you will not be able to work with it at all. Okay, now we're ready to roll out our pie crust. Now, the secret to this is wax paper. But to keep our wax paper from curling up while we're trying to work with it, I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of water on my work surface. And that's going to keep my wax paper from curling up. So I'm going to get a sheet on here. I want it pretty big. You can see it lays out flat. Now my pie pan is just barely fits on there, so I really want an extra sheet of wax paper so I can make my pie crust a little bigger. So I'm going to put out a second sheet. I don't have quite enough water on these edges here. Now, keep those little edges down. Now I'm ready to put my ball of pie crust down. So I'm just going to kind of mash it down like that a little bit. And then I'm going to top it with more wax paper. Now you cannot use parchment paper to do this because parchment paper is just too heavy and you can't see through it to see what you're doing. Okay, now I've got my rolling pin. I'm going to roll it out. Now, if you don't have a rolling pin, but if you have a dowel, or you can send your husband to Home Depot to get a dowel, he can just get a dowel and cut it to size. When I was doing an herb class, I didn't want to buy rolling pins for everybody, so my husband was good enough to go to the Home Depot and buy me the dowels and make everyone their own individual rolling pin. Okay, now when you're rolling out pie crust, you always start from the center and roll out. So I'm just going to kind of try and get a circle. It's kind of hard to do. That's why I really make my pie crust really kind of more than I really need. So here we go. I want to make sure my circle is bigger than my pie pan. It's going to be pretty close. I need just a little bit more over here. Okay, now I'm going to pull off this wax paper, those top sheets. Put my pie pan on top, put my hand under here, and just flip. Now for those who've always had trouble trying to figure out how to get their pie crust in their pie pan, this is the way you do it. Just kind of pat it down where it's all the way in, and then it should just peel right off. Now if for some reason you have reason where it's just not really just peeling right off, you can put it in the refrigerator for a minute and the wax paper will come off. Now if you got these little bits of, you got these little empty spots, but that's okay. You can just break off some and fill in the gaps. Okay, now we're just going to just kind of flute it here. Now if you're worried about making it all pretty like they show in the stores and all this, just remember this is homemade. It doesn't have to be just perfect. Because usually it's hard to get it perfect where you got those pretty little flutes and all that on it. So I'm just going to kind of pinch it here together. Okay, now I want to get a fork. I want to prick the bottom. This feels like I got it pretty thick. I might could have rolled it out a little thinner. And then I'm going to push my fork into the edges like that. Okay. Now is the time we're going to put it in the refrigerator, and we're going to leave it in the refrigerator for 15 to 30 minutes. Now I've preheated my oven to 450 while my pie crust was chilling in the refrigerator, and now I'm ready to bake it 8 to 10 minutes, however long it takes for it to become golden brown. Now this little oven here is an Oster toaster oven, and I really like it because it's hard to do videos on a regular oven at the house, but this works really well up here. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. We've taken our pie crust out of the oven. Now you'll notice it didn't shrink, it didn't pull away from the pan. And that's because we let it rest for 15 to 30 minutes in the refrigerator. Now that prevents the gluten from forming, which is what makes your pie crust shrink. Now we're going to put it on the cooling rack. Really real coconut pie begins with a pie crust made with coconut oil, which we have already made, and it begins with real coconut milk. Now this is a can of coconut milk. I find it in the Asian department of the grocery store. Now I need 2 cups of it, so this is a 3.5 ounce can, so I have a choice. I can either use this can of coconut milk and then make up the difference with milk, but since my daughter-in-law is lactose intolerant, I'm going to use all coconut milk. And it comes really thick, and you're going to have to stir it up. So I'm going to pour it in there. Then of course I need an addition of this other coconut milk. And I just really need just a tiny bit more. I don't need that much more. Now we need 3 eggs. These are our free-range chicken eggs that we have here on the farm. I've got the egg whites sitting at room temperature for the meringue. Now if you have your own fresh eggs, when you're making meringue, you want to make sure your eggs are at least 3 to 4 days old. Now I also need a cup of sugar. So I'm going to put in my iron skillet. I grew up making pie. We cooked everything in an iron skillet. The only thing we cooked in a saucepan was vegetables. And then I need 3 tablespoons of flour. Just that. And I'm going to whisk this up. Now when you're cooking with flour, you don't want to just dump your milk in there because you're going to have lumps and flour floating to the top. Get my pan going here. What you want to do is add just enough of your milk to kind of make a paste. And get it all incorporated in there. If I was to just dump the whole thing in here, I would have all kinds of lumps. So I'm just getting it in here a little at a time. Get all the sugar and flour in there. Then add in the rest, and then stirring in it the rest of my milk. And I really like a wire whisk for this. You can already smell the coconut aroma. As I'm waiting for this to kind of heat up, I'm going to go ahead and kind of beat up my egg yolks. And this is something too you just don't throw in there. You have to temper your eggs before you put them in there, or you're going to have scrambled eggs in your pie filling. Now I'm just going to heat this up and cook it until it starts getting hot. And you just, by experience, you can just tell by looking at it when it's at that stage, when it starts looking like it's kind of cooked. Okay, I've been heating this about 5 minutes, and it went from a really thin stage to I can kind of tell it's trying to thicken up. I see a few bubbles on the side. I'm going to kind of taste it and see that it's pretty warm. So now it's time to add my egg yolks. Now what I'm going to do is take a little bit of my pie filling and put it in there with my eggs and beat that up. And then I'm going to add, just keep adding it. And this is called tempering. You're gradually warming up your eggs so they don't turn into scrambled eggs when you're making your pie filling. Okay, now I'm about ready to put that in there. I'm going to kind of keep my whisk going as I pour that in. And get all those wonderful yellow egg yolks in there. Don't want to lose any of them. And I'm going to just kind of keep going. I might need to turn my heat down a little to low. And just keep mixing this up. I want it to come to a boil. I don't want it just a rolling boil, but I want it to simmer. And it'll thicken up as I'm stirring. That's why I like a wire whisk, to keep the lumps from forming. Now, my mother never heard of a wire whisk. She just used a spoon. For that fact, she never heard of a spatula. All that came afterwards. So we have so many new cooking tools that we used to not have back when I was growing up. Okay, I'm going to let this cook for just a little bit longer. It's getting nice and thick. You can see the egg yolks have really given it a dark yellow color. Now, we have always used iron skillets. That's been my preferred utensil to use, but I'll be 70 in about 3 weeks, and iron skillets have really gotten too heavy for me to handle. And I've been hunting for the perfect cookware to use instead and just really haven't found it. So when I get through with this, I'll have to have my husband pour it into the pie shell. Now our filling is ready. We're going to take it off the heat. So I just need to kind of push this aside. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla flavoring. You always want to add your vanilla flavoring after you've taken it off the heat. So I'm going to get that in there. Stir it up real good. And now, of course, what would coconut pie be without coconut? So here I'm going to add a cup of shredded coconut. So I'm just going to spread that in and mix it in. Now, I used a cup of sugar in this, and of course my family likes things pretty sweet. Now, it could be too sweet for you. If you want to reduce it to 3/4 of a cup of sugar, you can certainly do that, and it won't hurt the recipe at all. Okay, we've got all this mixed in, and now we're ready for my husband to put it in the pie shell. Okay, now we've got our pie filling in the pie. And of course, I was able to get my husband to help me because I promised to let him sop the pan. So he's over there sopping the pie pan, the skillet. Okay, now we're ready for our meringue. And I'm going to set this over here out of the way while we get ready for it. Okay, now I'm ready to make my meringue. Now I've got 3 egg whites that are at room temperature, and I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cream tartar. One thing they seem to leave out when you do cream of tartar, they forget to tell you to go ahead and stir it in because it kind of wants to just sit there. So I'm just going to kind of agitate that a little bit. And then we need a teaspoon of vanilla flavoring. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that a little bit. That's about half a capful. Now, it calls for 6 tablespoons of sugar. Now, we normally use raw sugar, which is a little heavy for a meringue. I don't think it will hold up very well. So I'm using powdered sugar instead, but if you had white granulated sugar, that would be perfect. Well, now I'm just going to beat it till soft peaks form. Okay, there I have my soft peaks. So I'm going to add just about a tablespoon of sugar at a time. Okay, now we have our stiff peaks. Now it's ready to put on our pie. And I'm just going to kind of clean off the beaters a little bit. Now those waiting to lick the beaters might not appreciate me cleaning off the beaters a little bit. That's what we always look forward as kids, is getting to lick the beaters. Okay, now I've got my pie over here, and I'm ready. Now you always want to make sure that the meringue always comes to the edge of the pie. So I like to kind of make sure all my edges are done first. Then I'm going to go back and fill in the middle. Kind of be a tricky job sometimes to make sure you get it all even. Just kind of pull it in from the sides to fill in that middle. If you like really a lot of meringue, you could have used a 4th egg to have a little more meringue there. Now my sister-in-law did not like meringue at all because her brothers, because they had cows and calves, and they used to bottle feed the calves, and they would tell her that meringue was made out of that calf slopper when they were nursing or drinking bottles. So if I make a pie for her, I'm just going to put something like Cool Whip on the top of it. Put a lot of pretty little swirls in there. Okay, and now this is a coconut pie, so I'm adding a little more coconut to it. So I'm going to sprinkle this coconut on here. And you can just make this as heavy or as light as you want. Now I'm ready to put it in a preheated oven that's preheated at 400 degrees. Now I'm going to bake that about 10 minutes or until you kind of start getting the peaks of it golden brown. Okay, we cooked our meringue 5 minutes or so. You can see the coconut is kind of brown, but now the hard part. We've got to wait at least an hour or two for it to cool before we can cut into it and enjoy that amazing, really real coconut pie. Now you need to serve amazing, really real coconut pie at room temperature. Remember what I said about coconut oil become really hard when it's cold. Now it becomes a liquid at 78 degrees Fahrenheit and above, and a solid at 78 degrees Fahrenheit and below, and harder depending on the temperature. A pie crust made with coconut oil will be really difficult to slice when it is cold. Thank you so much for joining me today at Homemade Cooking in Texas. These are my favorite recipes, and I hope they will become yours. Now, if you enjoy these recipes, please like and subscribe so you can see more of these type recipes. We have been making a full-time living here on our organic farm since 1991. We need your support to continue our small family farm by liking and subscribing to our channel. Thank you so much.